moment, the Africa Corps has made a notable entrance in Burkina Faso with a mission to ensure the safety of the country's leader and its people. Burkina Faso faces an Islamist insurgency on its borders and increasing insecurity in the Sahel region. The eviction of French troops and UN peacemakers has only heightened insecurity in the Sahel region. Well, it has led to the bloodiest year on record in the region, claiming 14,000 lives in the conflict.
The front lines are heating up in Ukraine. Russian forces, Russian forces are advancing operations in various parts of Ukraine. There has been a surge in attacks in Ukraine's war-ravaged Donetsk region. The Russian military has fired between 1,500 and 2,500 shells and rockets and is targeting crucial infrastructure now. Since Russia's full-scale invasion in 2022, Donetsk has become the war's weakest point of battle. It is the eastern province, and 57% of which is occupied by Russia, and with its relentless attacking, Moscow is trying to gain full control of the region. Authorities say that Russia is trying to destroy critical infrastructure so that people find it difficult to remain in the region in winter. Not only this, Russian forces have intensified their offensive in eastern Ukrainian city of Avdiivka as well. According to Ukrainian officials, some parts of Avdiivka are in critical condition as the Ukrainian forces are fighting Russian shelling and incursions. Avdiivka is located 15 kilometers north of the Russian-controlled city of Donetsk in the industrial Donbas region. Russia launched a renewed push to capture Avdiivka in October, with troops on three sides of the town pounding it with relentless artillery strikes in a bid to force a Ukrainian withdrawal. Since Moscow recharged its attacks around Avdiivka, Kyiv's top general and Western military specialists have been critical about Ukraine's capacity to keep them down. As per authorities, fewer than 1,000 residents remain in the city, with many sheltering in cellars and basements. Officials say not a single building remains intact. Russian President Vladimir Putin had earlier mentioned that his troops are holding ground on the outskirts of the town and had broken through Ukraine's defenses in some places. Meanwhile, Ukraine said that a group of its special forces blew up a drilling platform in the Black Sea that Russia was using to enhance the range of its drones.
And now shifting our focus to a continuous coverage of the Russia-Ukraine war. In the latest, the front lines are heating up in Ukraine. Russian forces are advancing its operations in various parts of Ukraine. There has been a surge in attacks in Ukraine's war-ravaged Donetsk region. The Russian military has fired between 1,500 to 2,500 shells and rockets and is now targeting crucial infrastructure in the region. Now, since Russia's full-scale invasion in 2022, Donetsk has become the war's weakest point of battle. It is the eastern province, and 57% of which is occupied by Russia. And with its relentless attacking, Moscow is trying to gain full control of the region. Officials say that Russia is trying to destroy critical infrastructure so that people find it difficult to remain in the region during the winter season. Not only this, Russian forces have intensified its offensive in eastern Ukrainian city of Avdiivka as well. According to the Ukrainian officials, some parts of Avdiivka are in critical condition as the Ukrainian forces are fighting Russian shelling and incursions. Avdiivka is located 15 kilometers north of the Russian-controlled city of Donetsk in the industrial Donbas region. Russia launched a renewed push to capture Avdiivka in October, with troops on three sides of the town pounding it with relentless artillery strikes in a bid to force a Ukrainian withdrawal from the area. Now, since Moscow recharged its attacks around Avdiivka, Kyiv's top general and Western military specialists have been critical about Ukraine's capacity to keep them down. As per the authorities, fewer than 1,000 residents remain in the city, with many sheltering in basements there. Officials say not a single building remains intact. Russian President Vladimir Putin had earlier mentioned that his troops are holding ground on the outskirts of the town and had broken through Ukraine's defenses in some places. Meanwhile, Ukraine said a group of its special forces blew up a drilling platform in the Black Sea that Russia was using to enhance the range of its drones.
Russian forces have intensified the offensive in eastern Ukrainian city of Avdiivka. Now, according to Ukrainian officials, some parts of Avdiivka are in critical condition as the Ukrainian forces are fighting Russian shelling and incursions. Is it just a matter of time that Avdiivka falls to Russia? What does Russia stand to gain from this strategic advancement in Ukraine? To discuss matters further, we are being joined up by Mr. Glenn Deason, who's a professor of international relations at the University of Southeastern Norway. Welcome to WION. It's always a pleasure speaking with you.
Thank you.
Yes. Mr. Deason, let's just start off with this. Is it almost certain now that Avdiivka will fall to Russia? Is it almost a done deal?
Yes, I think that it's quite obvious. I think it's collapsing as we speak quite rapidly as well. Now, how long it will take obviously depends if Ukraine will try to pull out what it can or fight on by sending more reserves. Obviously, this is what they did in Bakhmut, and Ukraine lost many of its best troops, holding on to something that was already lost. But you do have an infighting. Zelensky tends to want to hold on to territories which are already lost, while General Zaluzhny prefers to save the troops and pull out. So it depends what Ukraine decides to do, but the city is lost, or being lost at least.
Because a report suggests that the city had a population of about 32,000, which has been reduced to less than 1,000 now. So there are hardly any people living there. There's hardly any infrastructure left there. And of course, it is falling as we speak. Also wanted to get your thoughts on this now. If one just observes the Ukrainian map, Avdiivka is just a few kilometers from the Russian-occupied Donetsk city. Now, it's considered pivotal in the Kremlin's objective to gain control of the entire southeastern Donbass region. Talk to us about what Russia stands to gain from capturing Avdiivka, and why is Avdiivka important to Russia here?
Well, first of all, Avdiivka been a frontline state for 10 years, so the population has largely or completely removed itself since that time. But I think it will have a huge impact. Obviously, on the battlefield is quite important because Avdiivka has been the most fortified position for Ukraine. So with the collapse of Avdiivka, Russia can start making much greater territorial advancements, meeting softer targets as it moves along. And in time, it could also collapse all of southern Donetsk and then, get the Donbass, which has been a key issue in this war. But, it goes beyond this as well. I would say it also has a huge impact on morale. Obviously, very good for Russia and bad for Ukraine. But it's also, as you mentioned, it's been, as a frontline state, it's been this main city, for shelling Donetsk city with artillery for the past 10 years. In more recent time, also shelling the civilian population with American cluster ammunition. So it would be considered a great victory for Russia if they could take it. Also, given that it was so fortified, it would free up almost 40,000 Russian troops, which can then move on, and this could have a snowball effect. So there's a reason why Ukraine wants to hold on to it, but I think they have given up on that ambition now.
Mr. Deason, also wanted to just, pick on what you had mentioned that, it's a fortified town and Russia also is looking to make it a fortress. I wanted to talk to you, or rather understand from you, what makes Avdiivka a fortress town? What makes it so fortified? Is it the infrastructure there, whatever is left of it, or is it something else?
Yeah, well, it's an industrial town, and so it has a lot of natural fortifications. Now, once you move out of Donbass, you don't have these heavy industries anymore, and it's very difficult to, and it then becomes much easier to move forward. So they use these heavy industries, such as the coke plant there, as being very important to fortify. And again, it has worked for this reason. How the Russians initially began to break through, now that they put Avdiivka in a tactical encirclement, it was because they came from the north. But initially, the Russians broke in by coming up in the south. They actually had to dig into a pipe going into the city and then advance far closer into the center, which was what initially caused confusion and panic among the Ukrainians. So it's not like as a fortified position, it served this purpose. It's been very, very effective, actually. So
Mr. Deason, now this is not the first time that Russia has targeted Avdiivka. There have been several attempts in the past as well. It started back in October, even earlier. I wanted to just understand, can Russia's recent advancements in Avdiivka, or rather near takeover of Avdiivka that we're nearly about to see, is it a direct consequence of the halt in US military support to Ukraine? Will more cities fall to Russia now?
Well, obviously the lack of equipment and ammunition has been a common complaint by the Ukrainian military leadership on the front. So obviously less weapon supply also reduces the ability to fight. That would be common sense. However, there's also other problems, such as the manpower. Like NATO's trying to train new Ukrainians to go fight Russia, but you can't just put an army together on the go. So a lot of the people who are being sent to the front now are not well trained. They're not professionals. So the quality of the soldiers have dropped, but also, of course, the lack of ammunition and equipment also makes matters a lot worse.
Last year, we saw the US president standing on Ukrainian soil on the one-year anniversary. We're approaching another anniversary of the war. Should we expect any other appearances on Ukrainian soil this time?
It depends. I think everything is heating up a bit more in Kyiv as well. But I think there's less opportunities, I guess, for making this grandstanding, because everyone now sees that Ukraine is faltering. The only thing is we're in a bit of a difficult position, because on one hand Ukraine is falling and it can't really be saved. So, and this was kind of evident. For example, when NATO Secretary General went to United States about 2 weeks ago, he tried to make a plea for more weapons, and essentially his argument was, this is a good deal. We get to kill Russians, and it's good for American arms industry. So I don't think anyone even has the pretense anymore that Ukraine can win this. But again, for NATO's sake, we're fighting with Ukrainians, so we don't really have any incentives to halt the fighting. So but in terms of going to Kyiv to make a grandstanding, I don't think that would be it would be very convincing at this point.
There's one quick one that I also want to get your thoughts on before we wrap up, sir. Putin is expected to be on Turkish soil very soon. Within few days from now, he will be visiting Turkey, which is a NATO state. What kind of tremors is that visit going to send across the West?
Well, it kind of makes the point obvious that Russia is not isolated. A key objective, of course, of this war was to defeat Russia on the battleground, destroy its economy, isolate it in the world, and then knock it out as up the ranks of great powers. This is very openly stated by America. This was the objective of provoking this war and the reason for sabotaging the peace agreements. But I think the divisions within NATO runs very deep. I think we've been able to cover up some of it, but there's a lot of divisions now, which I think will begin to surface, especially as Ukraine falls. So there's a lot of difficult days ahead for NATO.
That was Mr. Glenn Deason, Professor of International Relations, University of Southeastern Norway, joining us right here on WION. Thank you so much for sharing all your insights, sir.
My pleasure.
Now, Russia has accused the United States President Joe Biden of carrying out strikes in Iraq and Syria, and this to boost his image as the presidential election campaign is heating up.
Russia says that the strikes were not in retaliation for a deadly attack on US soldiers. Now, on Friday, the United States began pounding dozens of targets linked to Iran's Revolutionary Guard Corps and allied groups. The strikes came after 3 US soldiers were killed in Jordan in an attack that Washington blames on Iranian-backed militias. At a meeting of the United Nations Security Council held to discuss the strikes, well, it was requested by Moscow, which said that there was no justification for the US action.
We see in these flex their muscles attempts. First of all, a desire to influence domestic political landscape in America. A desire to somehow correct the disastrous image of the current American administration on the international arena, as the presidential election campaign is heating up. Also, the fact that these acts could lead to a further escalation of international tensions and lead to the death of civilians is not of concern to Washington strategists.
Now, the United States justified the strikes in Syria and Iraq under Article 51 of the founding UN Charter. The article covers the individual or collective rights of states to self-defense against armed attack.
The US has also maintained that the retaliatory strikes, of which Iraq was not informed in advance, were aimed at holding Iran-aligned proxy groups accountable.
It is, of course, about holding these Iran-aligned malign proxy groups accountable. And so what these strikes were on Friday, you saw the United States conduct strikes on more than 85 locations at 75 facilities in Iraq and Syria. 3 were in Iraq and 4 were in Syria, and these locations were used by the IRGC and affiliated militias to attack U.S. forces.
Washington added that the strikes in Syria and Iraq were separate and distinct from U.S. and British strikes against the Iran-aligned Houthi group in Yemen.
Now, on Monday, the U.S. Central Command forces conducted another strike against 2 Houthi explosive uncrewed surface vessels. US says its actions will protect freedom of navigation and make international waters safer and more secure for military and merchant vessels.
And meanwhile, the battle in the Red Sea continues as well. The Black Sea is also on the boil, and asymmetric warfare, it's being witnessed here.
Of course, this is between Kyiv and Moscow in the Black Sea. It's a high-stakes battle. While the Ukrainian troops aren't making any advances on the land, the Russian troops continue to pummel the Ukrainians. In the sea, however, the Ukrainians are packing a punch.
These are the images revealed by the Ukrainian Defense Ministry on the 1st of February, showing a drone attacking a Russian warship in Crimea.
Ukraine's military intelligence agency says that the ship costing $60 to $70 million was on patrol in western Crimea when a special unit struck it. Disinformation has been part of the grinding war that marks its 2nd anniversary come February.
And it is not possible to independently verify claims by either side. Ukraine had staged a string of damaging attacks in Crimea in the course of its 22-month-long war with Russia.